I have watched in horror the mirror image of another Vietnam unfolding. So many similarities, so many things said that remind me of that war 30 years ago, which left me paralyzed for the rest of my life. Refusing to learn from our experiences in Vietnam, our government continues to pursue a policy of deception, distortion, manipulation, and denial, doing everything it can to hide from the American people their true intentions and agenda in Iraq. The flag-draped caskets of our dead begin their long and sorrowful journeys home, hidden from public view, while the Iraqi casualties are not even considered worth counting. Some estimate as many as 100,000 have been killed so far, and now 1 million. The paraplegics, amputees, burn victims, the blinded and maimed, shocked and stunned, brain damaged and psychologically stressed now fill our veterans' hospitals. Most of them were not even born when I came home wounded to the Bronx VA in 1968. The same life-saving medical evacuation procedures that kept me alive in Vietnam are bringing home a whole new generation of severely maimed from Iraq. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which afflicted so many of us after Vietnam, is just now beginning to appear among soldiers recently returned from the current war. For some, the agony and suffering, sleepless nights, anxiety attacks, and awful bouts of insomnia, loneliness, alienation, anger, rage will last for decades, if not their whole lives. They will be trapped in a permanent nightmare of that war, of killing another man, a child, watching a friend die, fighting against an enemy that can never be seen, while at any moment someone, a child, a woman, an old man, anyone, might kill you. Veterans Against the War. And just as we marched in Miami in August of 1972 as Vietnam Veterans Against the War, still others have refused deployment to Iraq, gone to Canada, and begun to resist this immoral and illegal war. For months leading up to the invasion of Iraq, citizens here in the United States and around the world marched and demonstrated in growing opposition to our government's reckless plan to launch an attack. I proudly participated in protests in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C., and may I add, London, England as well, doing countless interviews and speaking out wherever people would listen to me. Many prominent world leaders, including Nelson Mandela and Pope John Paul II, began to raise their voices against this terrible and ill-fated foreign policy. This extraordinary opposition culminated on February 15th, 2003, when more than 30 million citizens in over 100 nations participated in the most massive demonstration on behalf of peace in the history of the world. Never before had so many human beings come together before a war had even begun to say no to the insanity and madness. I think of my brothers in the Iraq Vets Against the War when I read this part. And my brothers still alive from Vietnam Veterans Against the War. Many of us promised ourselves long ago that we would never allow what happened to us in Vietnam to happen again. We have an obligation, a responsibility, as citizens, as Americans, as human beings, to raise our voices in protest. We could never forget the hospitals, the intensive care wards, the wounded all around us fighting for their lives, those long and painful years after we came home, those lonely nights. There were lives to save on both sides, young men and women who would be disfigured and maimed, mothers and fathers who would lose their sons, and daughters, wives, and loved ones, who would suffer for decades to come if we did not do everything we could to stop the forward momentum of this madness. We sensed it very early and very quickly. We saw the same destructive patterns reasserting themselves all over again as our leaders spoke of bad guys and evildoers, imminent threats and mushroom clouds, attempting to frighten and intimidate the American people into supporting their agenda. The Bush administration seems to have learned some very different lessons than we did from Vietnam. Where we learned of the deep immorality and obscenity of that war, they learned to be even more brutal, more violent and ruthless, i.e. shock and awe. Sadly, the war on terror has become a war of terror, where we learn to be more open and honest, to be more truthful, to expose, to express, to shatter the myths of the past. They seem to have learned the exact opposite: to hide, to censor, to fabricate, to mislead and deceive, to perpetuate those myths. Instead of being intimidated or frightened, many of us became more outraged and more determined than ever to stop these ignorant, arrogant men and women who never saw the things we saw, never had to grieve over the loss of their bodies or the bodies of their sons and daughters, never had to watch as so many friends and fellow veterans were destroyed by alcoholism and drugs, homelessness, imprisonment, neglect, torture, abandonment, and betrayal in the painful aftermath of that war. These leaders had never experienced the tears, the dread and rage, the feeling that there is no God, no country, nothing but the wound, the horrifying memories, the shock, the guilt, the shame, the terrible injustice that took the lives of more than 58,000 Americans and over 2 million Vietnamese. We had to act. We had to speak. I am no longer the 28-year-old man, 6 years returned from the war in Vietnam, who sat behind that typewriter in Santa Monica in the fall of 1974. I am nearly 62 now. I'm nearly 60 now. I'm 62. My hair and beard are almost completely white. The nightmares and anxiety attacks have all but disappeared, but I still do not sleep well at night. I toss and turn in increasing physical pain, but I remain very positive and optimistic. I am still determined to rise above all of this. I know my pain and the horrors of my past will always be with me, but perhaps not with the same force and fury of those early years after the war. I have learned to forgive my enemies and forgive myself. It has been very difficult to heal from the war while living in America. And I have often dreamed of moving to neutral ground, another country, yet I have somehow made a certain peace, even in a nation that so often still seems to believe in war and the use of violence as a solution to its problems. There has been a reckoning, a renewal. The scar will always be there, a living reminder of that war, but it has also become something beautiful now, something of faith and hope and love. I have been given an opportunity to move through that dark night of the soul to a new shore, to gain an understanding, a knowledge, an entirely different vision. I now believe in many ways I have suffered for a reason, and in many ways I have found that reason in my commitment to peace and nonviolence. My life has been a blessing in disguise, even with the pain and great difficulty that my physical disability continues to bring. It is a blessing to be able to speak on behalf of peace, to be able to reach such a great number of people. I saw firsthand what our government's terrible policy had wrought. I endured, I survived, and understood. The one gift I was given in that war was an awakening. I became a messenger, a living symbol, an example, a man who learned that love and forgiveness are more powerful than hatred, who has learned to embrace all men and women as my brothers and sisters. No one will ever again be my enemy, no matter how hard they try to frighten or intimidate me. No government will ever teach me to hate another human being. I have been given the task of lighting a lantern, ringing a bell, shouting from the highest rooftops, warning the American people and citizens everywhere of the deep immorality and utter wrongness of this approach to solving our problems, pleading for an alternative to this chaos and madness, this insanity and brutality. We must change course. I truly feel that this beautiful world has given me back so much more than it has taken from me. So many others that I knew are gone, and gone way too young. I am grateful to be alive after all these years and all that I've been through. I am thankful for every day. Life is so precious. Thank you very much.